Okay, these are the supplies you're going to be needing. You're going to need your Velcro, the size that you want, your elastic for the leg area, your seam ripper, and a safety pin to pull the corners out if you need to, and some pins. So from here, let me show you the process for the diapers. You're going to get your pattern. I cut mine out of Hellon so that I can reuse it. You're going to mark your tail hole. The patterns are in the files section on the site. Then you're going to find the fabric that you want, and you're going to cut 2 pieces of each fabric that you want, creating 4 because there's no seam here. And then what you're going to do is you're going to stitch a 1/4 of an inch seam from the bottom to the bottom of the tail hole, from the top of the other space to the top 1/4 of an inch on both pieces, so they'll both look like this. Then what I do is I open these up and I press the seam open with my iron, and then they're ready to continue on from there. Now what I do is I will take actually this pattern, this size pattern here, once I've pressed it, and I make me a template for the lining because the lining doesn't need to have a seam in it. So what I do is I take this pattern, well, this one is just not, the fabric's a little bit larger than it needs to be, but that's fine. So I take this pattern and I go ahead, and this is my lining pattern now. So then what I do is I cut my Warm and Natural 100% cotton lining. I put that on there and I cut my lining as one piece. So then that's the lining fabric. So then what I do is I lay my lining fabric down first. I put my first piece of fabric with right side facing you, and the seam is on the bottom. Then your second piece of fabric is right side facing the other. Then what I do is I actually pin the top of the seams together where they match up, and I pin the top of the 2 tail holes to hold them stable before I stitch. Then I pin at the bottom, and then you can put additional pins for stitching as well. Then what I do is I stitch 1/4 of an inch all the way around the diaper, and you don't touch the tail hole at this point. And then what I do is I actually cut the corners to save bulk in the corners for when you turn the diaper, and so you can cut that off. Now the part that everyone has problems with is I'm going to show you how I put my elastic on. Other people do it different ways, but this is how I do it. Okay, what I do is I go about 1 inch down, 1/2 inch down from the corner of the what wraps around, like the little arms I call them, and I tack it a little bit right there back and forth. Then what I do is I pull the elastic, I pull the elastic around, and I pull the fabric at the same time, because unless you have a strong feed dog, it doesn't pull really well. And then I go to the bottom of the tail hole, and then I back stitch there to hold it, and then I cut the elastic off. And you can do the same on the other side. I go from the bottom of the tail hole because I just turned it over, and then I pull this way. I don't know the exact measurement, it's just I pull and make sure that it has just some tension against it. It's not perfect, but it works. And then that part is over, so that's how I put in my elastic. Now what I do is I take the diaper, and since there's no seam in the interface or in the Warm and Natural batting, what I do is I reach through the hole. You have your 2 pieces of fabric here, so you have to be a little careful. So I just clip in the hole here, and I clip kind of to the top of the hole and the bottom of the tail hole. Doesn't have to be totally perfect. Then I take my pins out. Then what I do is I go in between the first, I always keep the batting on the bottom, so I go in between the first piece of fabric and the second piece of fabric, and then I remove all my pins, of course. So what I do is I reach my finger in, between the two pieces of fabric only, and then I turn my diaper this way to the right side so I can continue to work on it. So once it's all turned and you've got your one fabric on this side, one fabric on the other side, then I go and I press along the top here with the iron, and I press along the bottom as well here just to make it flat, preparing it for or your Velcro. So then what I do is I go in and line up the tail holes between the fabric. So you're going to have a piece of fabric on the bottom, the lining in the center, and then the fabric on top, and then I pin it. I'm not really good with tail holes. There's people in the group that are much better with tail holes, but this is how I set mine up to go ahead and sew my tail hole in. Then what I do is I add my Velcro. I just put whatever size you're going to put across the top and stitch it in. I always do the soft here, and I do the rough side here to where it goes across. I used white thread here so you could see what I did. Then for the tail hole, like I said, I'm not fancy with the tail hole. I usually use a zigzag stitch. This one here is not the best. So anyhow, and then I just stitch around the tail hole and take the pins out, and your diaper is completed. The worst part is the tail hole, in my opinion, getting that pretty. Some of our members have much better tail holes than I do, but it seems to work okay. And there's your elastic in the legs. Some of our folks do casing. I've never done casing, so I can't advise on the casing piece of the project. So that's how you put together a diaper.